Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. It was a Tuesday, not a dramatic day, not a storm or an anniversary, just a regular, quiet Tuesday. And maybe that's what made it worse, that a regular moment became the moment everything broke. She stood at the top of the stairs, fists clenched, face flushed, and screamed, "I'm better off on my own." No context, no warning. Just 7 words that dropped like glass shattering in a silent room. I didn't answer. I didn't ask her why. I just looked at her and realized something that froze me in place. She wasn't trying to start a fight. She was trying to end something. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't plead. She meant it. And in that moment, I saw it. The months that led up to this. The missed touches. The shrinking conversations. The way she used to reach for my hand and then started reaching for her phone instead. It wasn't sudden. This moment was built quietly, and I had ignored every nail she drove into the coffin of what we used to be. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway like an unwanted guest in my own house. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. She made coffee, took a call from work, scrolled her feed. When I asked if we were okay, she shrugged. "You're a good man, Ryan. But I just don't feel it anymore." That line, "don't feel it," stuck. Not, "I'm unhappy." Not, "you hurt me." Just nothing. Emptiness packaged as honesty. That night, I lay in bed beside her. She fell asleep facing the wall. I didn't move, didn't breathe too loudly. I listened to the silence between us, the kind that doesn't get fixed with flowers or dinners or second chances. She wanted out, and she wanted it clean. But I wasn't going to beg. Not this time. I stared at the ceiling and made a decision. If she thought she'd be better alone, I'd let her find out. No yelling, no begging, no threats. I would give her exactly what she asked for, a life without me in it. But not just physically. I'd vanish emotionally, quietly, strategically. I wouldn't disappear. I'd dissolve. And by the time she realized what she'd actually lost, I'd already be long gone. I didn't say a word. The next morning, I left before sunrise. No note, no goodbye, just keys on the hook and silence in my place. When I got home that night, she was already out. Her car gone. A new perfume lingering in the hallway. Something floral and sharp, not the warm vanilla scent I knew for years. The fridge was full. The house was clean, but it didn't feel like home anymore. She was shedding everything that made us, us. Bit by bit. Laugh by laugh. Touch by touch. Over the next week, I watched it all unfold. She posted more, boomerangs with cocktails, captions about freedom, space, energy, new faces, brighter filters, her world expanding without me in it. She smiled bigger in pictures than she did in real life. I didn't ask questions, didn't confront. I observed, and what I saw told me everything. She wasn't trying to heal. She was trying to replace, to bury, to erase what we were under, something loud, fast, and temporary. The people around her cheered it on. They called it a glow-up, said she looked free, said this was the version of her that had been missing. And maybe they were right. But what they didn't see, and what she didn't expect, was that I wasn't sitting at home grieving. I was planning. In the quiet, I started moving pieces. I redirected all automatic payments to my private account. Froze the joint credit card. Not to punish her, but to divide. She wanted separation. I gave her precision. I booked a week-long work trip. Didn't tell her until the night before. She barely looked up from her phone when I mentioned it. I left before she woke up. In that time, I started organizing everything. My own address, my own income channel, a financial firewall that separated hers from mine with no overlap. No drama, no legal threats, just clean, quiet efficiency. While she was out discovering her new life, I was building mine. One that didn't orbit around her moods, her plans, or her version of what freedom looked like. I stopped texting first, stopped waiting up, stopped filling the silence with soft attempts to reconnect. And slowly, something changed. She started noticing. It began with small questions. "Are you okay?" Then came the longer stares across the room. The hesitation before walking out the door. The way she started dressing up more, but smiling less. I didn't respond. Because the shift wasn't finished yet. She had to believe she had won. That she was flying high. That I was just frozen in place, waiting for her to return. Because only then would the fall feel real. Only then would she feel what it meant to be truly alone. Not because she was abandoned, but because she asked for it. And I simply agreed. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a betrayal. It was erasure, the kind that doesn't make noise, but takes everything. After 2 weeks of her freedom phase, something in her shifted. The story slowed down. The nights out grew shorter. The laughter on the phone call started sounding forced. And she stopped tagging friends in her photos. She had chased attention like oxygen. But it only lasted as long as she was interesting. And alone, she wasn't interesting anymore. The people she thought would orbit her life forever had started drifting. One by one. Subtly. No hard goodbyes. Just less time, fewer messages, late replies. I wasn't surprised. She built a temporary kingdom, made of compliments and clinks of wine glasses. But kingdoms like that collapse the moment the spotlight moves. And it did. Because she had no story to sell anymore. She wasn't healing. She wasn't growing. She was just circling. Meanwhile, I was different. I'd started training again. Every morning at 6 a.m. before the world opened. Quiet roads. Early gym sessions. Cold water on my face. All reminders that I was still here. Still standing. And I didn't need saving. I was building without her. I stopped checking her social media. Blocked her on the platforms that mattered. Not out of anger, but necessity. She had become noise. And peace doesn't negotiate with noise. One night, I came home from work and she was in the kitchen. Not dressed up. Not smiling. Just quiet. She asked if I had time to talk. I said I was tired. She didn't push. She just stood there for a few seconds too long, like waiting for something to snap back. When it didn't, she walked to the living room, curled up under a blanket, and stared at the wall. It wasn't sadness on her face. It was the realization that I wasn't reacting anymore. That she no longer had the strings to pull. She started leaving post-it notes in random places. Do you need anything from the store? Dinner tonight. Want to watch something? I never answered them. They weren't real questions. They were signals. Signals that the one thing she feared most was finally happening. She wasn't hated. She was irrelevant. And in her world, irrelevance was the worst kind of exile. But I wasn't doing it to punish her. I wasn't even trying to teach her a lesson. I was simply living without her, right next to her. And the proximity made it worse. Because there's nothing colder than a man who sleeps beside you and never reaches for your hand. She wanted to be on her own. She got her wish. She just didn't know being alone feels different when no one is watching. When there's no one left to perform for. When even your silence doesn't echo anymore. That's when she started unraveling. And I hadn't even made my final move yet. It was time to vanish. Not from the world, from her world. I didn't slam a door. I didn't pack bags in a fit of rage. That's not how men like me leave. Not anymore. I disappeared from the inside out. It began with silence. Deeper than before. No replies. No gestures. No recognition of her attempts. The texts. The looks. The sudden interest in routines she used to mock. I stopped reacting to her presence entirely. She became background, like furniture I didn't choose. And she felt it. She lingered in rooms longer, hoping I'd speak. Sat closer on the couch, just enough to be noticed. Started asking about my day, but not because she cared. Because she was grasping. I said nothing. Then came the logistics. I moved money into private accounts. Discreet, structured. I closed the card she used for impulse purchases, clothes, apps, overpriced delivery food. She found out when a payment failed. I watched her stare at the screen, lips parted like a question was forming. But no words came. That same week, I rented a private office space across town. Said I needed focus. She offered to visit for lunch sometime. I changed the subject. I updated all passwords. Canceled joint subscriptions. Removed her email from the cloud backup. Every shared thread, snipped without drama. She noticed, of course. She stopped asking questions. Instead, she started reacting. Sudden outbursts about distance. Accusations without clarity. Passive remarks about how I'd changed. She wasn't wrong. I had changed. But not into someone new. Into someone I was supposed to be before I let myself get deluded. I started sleeping in a separate room. At first, it was because I was working late. But I never moved back. The space became mine, spare, minimal, untouched by her scent or clutter. She asked me once if this was temporary. I looked at her and blinked slowly. Do you want it to be? She didn't answer. Because control had slipped, and she felt it. But I wasn't done yet. Next came the absence. I started leaving early, coming home late. She stopped knowing where I was, who I was with. She guessed, but never asked directly. Probably feared the answer. One night, I stayed out past midnight. No explanation. She was awake when I returned, sitting on the edge of the bed like she'd been rehearsing something. But when I walked past her, said nothing, and disappeared into the other room. She never delivered the speech she had prepared. She realized the conversation she wanted no longer had a listener. I wasn't angry. I wasn't distant. I was unavailable. Not just physically, emotionally, strategically, permanently unavailable. And the worst part? She didn't lose me to someone else. She lost me to clarity. To a man she thought would wait, but didn't. To a man she pushed away and assumed would crawl back. I didn't crawl. I vanished. Without fire. Without sound. Just gone. You don't notice silence until it starts replacing the things you take for granted. The morning coffee I used to bring her gone. The subtle check-ins. The text before leaving the office. The warmth behind small gestures. All erased. And she started noticing. But by then, the noticing came too late. She walked around the house slower, like her presence might pull attention back. She lingered near me longer than she used to, pausing in doorways, watching me more than she spoke. She was waiting for the tension to snap, for me to finally ask what was wrong. But I didn't, because nothing was wrong anymore. Everything was exactly where it needed to be, broken, exposed, real. I wasn't punishing her. I was living the version of life she asked for. The life where she didn't answer to anyone, where she was better on her own. So I gave her the stage. And now, there was no audience left to applaud. Even her friends began to fade. The ones who cheered her freedom early on stopped checking in. Their excitement about her independence dried up when the novelty wore off. The truth is, people love a new chapter, but they don't read past the first page. She started sitting alone at cafes where we used to go together. She scrolled her phone, but didn't smile anymore. I passed by once, unnoticed. She looked up from her drink and scanned the crowd like she was searching for something. Or someone. It wasn't me she expected to see. It was who she used to be when I was still part of the frame. But I had stepped out. Quietly. Cleanly. She tried creating friction just to feel something. Slammed a door one night. Said I was being cruel. I looked up. Calm. Steady. You said you were better off alone. I believed you. That hit harder than any argument. Because I didn't say it to win. I said it like a fact. She didn't reply. That night, she didn't come to bed. Slept on the couch. Or pretended to. I didn't check. Didn't ask. She wanted space. I gave her distance. She wanted freedom. I gave her silence. And the scariest thing she faced wasn't abandonment. It was indifference. Because indifference can't be negotiated with. You can cry, scream, beg, and it just watches. That weekend, I disappeared again. Left early. No message. No call. When I came back Sunday night, she looked up from the hallway like she had rehearsed something. But again, nothing came out. She just stared. And for the first time in years, I saw fear. Not the fear of me leaving. The fear that I had already left. Emotionally, mentally, permanently. And that she'd never get access to the version of me who once waited, once cared, once hoped. She was locked out. And I had changed the keys. The illusion started breaking where it always does, in public. We ran into each other at a mutual friend's engagement party. I wasn't going to attend, but something told me it was time for the next shift. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a presence. I arrived late. Alone. Suited. Focused. She didn't see me at first. Too busy performing. Laughing just a little too loudly. Holding her wine like a prop. But when our eyes met, everything in her posture changed. Her smile dropped half an inch. The mask cracked. I nodded once. Didn't approach. Didn't linger. And that was the strike. Because she expected anger. She expected tension. Maybe even a scene. But I gave her indifference. And in front of people, friends who used to call us solid, it was her who looked unsettled. I watched her try to recalibrate. She moved closer to groups, inserted herself into conversations, tried to appear distracted. But the eyes were already shifting. They noticed the stiffness, the imbalance. That night, I left without saying goodbye. She sent a text hours later. Did you really not have a single word for me? I didn't reply. Not because I was trying to be cruel, but because words have weight. And she'd spent all of mine. From that day on, things unraveled fast. The people who used to cheer her on stopped commenting. The likes dropped. The invitations slowed. I heard from a mutual that she wasn't doing well. That she seemed off. That she talked about missing something, but never said what. She wasn't missing me. She was missing the version of herself that existed next to me. The version that made sense because someone was steadying the foundation. Now, she was just floating. I moved out the following week. Quietly. Efficiently. Left no trace. Took only what was mine. Signed off on the split accounts. Rerouted my mail. Changed my emergency contact. She came home to a note. Just one line. This house was never the problem. It was what lived inside it. I didn't wait for a reaction. Didn't want to see her cry. Because tears meant there was still a connection. And I had nothing left to connect to. The man she left was gone. In his place stood someone who didn't need her to understand, to apologize, or to explain. I wasn't chasing clarity anymore. I was creating it. And it came in the shape of closed doors, severed ties, and no more explanations. From this point forward, she wasn't losing me. She had already lost me. Now she was just watching the consequences arrive, one by one, in the silence she asked for. After I left, I expected a few things. The backlash, the blame, the stories she'd spin to friends about how cold I'd become. What I didn't expect was silence. Not mine. Hers. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't post. For someone who built a public life, her retreat felt like collapse. Word got back to me in pieces. She stopped showing up at group events, declined invitations, canceled a planned girls' trip to Tulum with some vague excuse about not feeling like herself. And that was the truth, even if she didn't say it directly. She wasn't herself anymore. Because herself had always been defined by the reaction she could pull from others, by the access she had to control. And when that was gone, when I walked out without a raised voice or a final plea, the version of her she'd clung to lost its power. She tried reconnecting with old friends, ones she'd dropped during the rise of her new image. But they weren't interested. People remember who vanished when things were good, and they rarely welcome them back when things start falling apart. She reached out to my sister, casually, like nothing happened. My sister didn't respond. She tried messaging a mutual friend, the one who always took the middle ground. He sent her a single line. He gave you everything. You didn't see it. That ended the conversation. I wasn't watching all this out of bitterness. I wasn't tracking her movements. I was simply aware. You can't erase years with silence, but you can bury them with clarity. And what she felt now wasn't guilt. It was consequence. The kind that doesn't come with a warning, just a series of doors that don't open anymore. She moved apartments shortly after. Smaller, quieter. The city around her still loud, but her corner of it? Shrinking. She started posting again. But different now. No captions. No faces. Just vague quotes about rebuilding, trust, and letting go. But even her followers had thinned out. The digital applause was gone. And when you've built your identity on validation, silence is punishment. She reached out once. A short message. Hope you're well. I saw it. Didn't open it. She didn't deserve the read receipt. Not because I wanted her to suffer. Because I wanted her to sit with it. The stillness. The empty replies. The awareness that she called out into the void and no one called back. Not because no one cared, but because the man she used to rely on had vanished so deeply, so completely, that even his silence was out of reach. That's when she realized. She wasn't being ignored. She was no longer remembered. And that's a different kind of ending. It had been months. Months since the door closed. Since the last words were spoken. Since she watched me disappear, thinking I'd orbit back like a predictable season. She was wrong. And now she wanted answers. Not because she missed me, but because the silence was too loud. The attention too quiet. The fallback plan too empty. She showed up at my new place. I hadn't given her the address. But finding me wasn't hard. People talk. Especially when one person vanishes and the other keeps asking questions. When I opened the door, she froze. It wasn't the space that shocked her. It was the version of me standing in it. No longer the man who used to beg for peace. No longer the man who asked for closeness. I was sharper now, cleaner, focused. I didn't invite her in, just leaned against the doorframe. She didn't waste time. I just want to understand what happened. That line, simple, practiced, almost innocent. I nodded once. Let her speak. She talked about the past. About miscommunication. About how maybe we both played a part. She used soft words, regret, nostalgia, confusion. But I knew what she wanted. Control. A thread to pull. A reason to think she still had weight. I didn't give it to her. When she paused, waiting for me to say something, I just studied her face. It looked different now. Not aged, but exposed. She wasn't wearing her armor anymore. And I realized something. She wasn't here for closure. She was here to test if she still had access. So I gave her the truth. Not wrapped in anger. Not poisoned with blame. Just a calm, steady sentence that landed harder than any scream. You lost me the second I stopped needing to be heard. Her eyes flickered. That micro-expression of someone trying to process a blow they didn't see coming. Because she came prepared for an argument, not for nothing. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't explain. I stepped back, closed the door gently, and let the silence answer for me. She stood outside for a while. I didn't look through the peephole. I didn't need to. Because I knew. She wasn't shocked that I was cold. She was shattered that I was finished. Truly, finally, silently finished. And that moment, that pause after the door shut, was the real confrontation. Not loud. Not messy. Just final. The kind that echoes louder than any last word. She had spent so long preparing for the man I used to be. She didn't see the man I had become. And by the time she recognized him, he had already left the room. After that door closed, she didn't knock again. She waited outside for a while, hoping I'd change my mind. That maybe I'd open it back up and say something, anything. But I had no interest in repeating a conversation I never agreed to. She left eventually. Not with anger. With something colder. Resignation. And that's when the unraveling began. The invitations stopped completely. No more girls' nights. No brunches. No followers boosting her healing journey. Her social media turned gray, photos with blank captions, quotes with no weight behind them, vague mentions of loss and lessons. She had built her story on noise. But silence doesn't give her a storyline. The people who once rallied around her drifted, as they always do when the drama stops being entertaining. It's easy to support someone when there's a villain in the picture. But once I stopped playing the villain, there was no one left to blame but herself. She tried to reinvent. New gym, new hairstyle, new profile bio. But nothing caught. Because reinvention without reflection is just a costume change. Meanwhile, my world kept moving. I wasn't racing toward anything. I wasn't trying to win the breakup. I just lived, freely, clearly, intentionally. And the more I moved forward, the more she got stuck. She started messaging people I hadn't spoken to in years. Digging for clues. Trying to piece together who I was now, where I went, what I was doing, if there was someone else. There wasn't. Because this part of the story wasn't about revenge. It was about rebirth. I didn't need a new relationship. I needed a new silence. One that belonged to me, not the one she had forced on me years before. She reached out one last time. The message was long, winding, a mix of regret, confusion, and longing disguised as apology. She said things like, I didn't know how far I was pushing you. I thought you'd always be there. I wasn't trying to lose you. I read every word, then deleted it. Because the moment you have to explain why someone lost you, they never really valued you to begin with. She hadn't lost me because of one decision. She lost me because of a pattern, because of 1,000 moments she thought didn't matter. And now, she wanted a version of me that only existed when I still hoped. But that version was dead. And in his place stood a man she'd never met. One who didn't flinch when she left. One who didn't wait when she hesitated. One who didn't break when she disappeared. Now it was her turn. To sit in silence. Not the kind she controlled, but the kind that speaks for itself. And in that silence, she finally heard the one thing she never expected. Nothing. Because nothing is louder when it's all you're left with. It didn't end with a door slam. There was no final fight. No grand speech. No tearful hug where we both realized what we'd lost. That only happens in stories written to give people comfort. This was real life. And in real life, endings are quiet. It was a Thursday when the last thread broke. I was walking down a side street near the office when I saw her. She didn't see me. She was sitting outside a coffee shop, alone, staring into her cup like it might tell her what went wrong. And I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing. Not numbness. Not absence. Just completion. I stood there for a second longer than I needed to. Then turned the corner and disappeared again. She didn't call. Not after that day. She must have felt it too, the final shift. The realization that there was no version of me left that she could access. That even if she knocked again, there was no door. No handle. No house. I had burned the blueprint. And that's what she never expected. Not my strength. Not my silence. But the fact that I didn't leave traces. She had imagined me bitter, maybe alone, maybe clinging to what we had. Instead, I had rebuilt myself into someone even I barely recognized. Someone clean, someone cold, someone clear. The kind of man who doesn't need closure because he built his exit with surgical precision. She once said she wanted to find herself. I hope she did. Because I found me. Not the man I was with her. Not the man who shrank to avoid fights, who over-explained, who bent until he forgot what straight even looked like. I found the man who walks away. Quietly. Completely. And never returns. They say some endings come full circle. But this one didn't. This was a spiral. Downward for her. Upward for me. I don't talk about her anymore. Not with friends. Not in therapy. Not even in passing. Because the most powerful silence isn't the one you give to someone else. It's the one you give yourself. The silence that says, I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. That's not revenge. That's clarity. That's peace. And that's how I walked out of her life. Not with noise, but with nothing. And nothing is permanent. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.